Hello and welcome to the Catch a Lift Coaches Corner. I'm Cal head coach Melissa Luke, and this week I'm honored to welcome retired U.S. Army Master Sergeant Clayton Jensen to the show. Clay is a retired U.S. Army Master Sergeant, an avid outdoorsman, kayaker, outdoor photographer, and so much more. Welcome to this week's episode of the Coaches Corner. Clay,
thanks
welcome.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, it's our pleasure. So much we want to talk about today. Let's jump right in. Clay, would you start by just telling us a bit about your life growing up in Iowa and what would ultimately lead you to the United States Army?
Well, I guess, I grew up, my parents got divorced when I was 5, so I, would go back and forth half time at each house. And so my dad's house was about less than a mile from the river that goes through our town. So I spent a lot of time down there playing in the woods. And then my mom lived in a very small town in Iowa, about 100 people, like 8 miles from my dad. So the time I was there, I was running around in prairies and creeks and timbers and stuff. And I just never wanted to be inside at all. And so, I was a child of the 80s, A-Team, Rambo, MacGyver, all that stuff. And it's funny, but that's, from the time I was probably 7 or 8 years old, I wanted to be in the military. And specifically in, kind of the special operations type military.
Okay.
I knew I didn't want to be a grunt.
Yeah.
I grew up wrestling and playing soccer, and went pretty far with soccer, and then I broke my leg.
Oof.
And lost D1 scholarship offers, and it's like, well, plan B, and
yeah.
I went to college for a year, a small college, played soccer, and then, I just really wanted to join the military. I wanted to get out of Iowa. I wanted to see, the world, I guess, and
yeah,
all that, and the adventure. So, yeah.
So I just want to touch base back a second here, kind of on your time playing soccer, because that was, a great passion of yours. Would you touch on a little bit for us, being a member of the U.S. Under-17 team and the World Cup in Japan?
Well, so I started with the Olympic Development Program, which is kind of state run
okay.
at that level. When I was like 12 or 13. And then I was actually part of our high school's first year for soccer. We kind of worked for it and got it going. I scored the first goal in my high school soccer history. That was 30 years ago. 30 years ago this year, so 1991. And then I made the regional pool for development. And then I'd go to the Chicago area and practice. Then we have tournaments in Kentucky and Colorado and Dallas and stuff. And then this is probably June of '93. I got a phone call. My parents got a phone call and said, "Hey, we are striker for the soccer team, center forward and right forward. Both can't make the trip. Would Clay be interested in going to Japan and playing?" And, of course I was like, yeah. Absolutely. So we went over, we played South Korea, Thailand, Japan. And, it was an incredible experience.
Wow.
I grew up in Iowa. The only place I'd ever been was Arizona to see my older brother.
Right.
So here I end up in Japan playing in the original Olympic Stadium in Tokyo. And
wow.
That's
incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So what year then would you enlist in the Army, Clay?
So I graduated high school. Like I said, I went to college, and that was 95. And so in like November, I'd met a guy in school who had joined the National Guard for college money and everything. So I went ahead and did that. And then finished college following summer. I went to basic training after my freshman year of college, and just fell in love with the Army at basic. Probably
Yeah.
not your toughest, but kind of your most. It's not the real Army, but I like that.
Yeah.
I just liked how everything was, and so I decided when I got back from basic to go active duty, and then enlisted. So I got back in like September, and by January I was shipping out to airborne school. So,
what was your MOS, Clay?
Well, I started out as a 98 Golf, which when the Army kind of realigned MOS numbers became a 35 Papa. And that's a signals intelligence voice interceptor. So, we're linguists, but our job is to go in and listen to the enemy and translate, transcribe, and then, if we can, locate them. So, yeah.
Clay, how many times, so you were in the Army a long time, a lot of years, a lot of deployments. How many times and where would you deploy throughout your career?
I have 13 deployments, 7 to combat zones, and the others are South America. And, I would go down there. When I joined, it was kind of the height of the war on drugs down there in 95. It was really, Pablo Escobar had been killed in 93, and stuff kind of exploded after that. We went from one group to 7 groups. So I'd go back and forth between here, Ecuador, Colombia, and then, the war started. And then I would alternate between Iraq, Afghanistan, Colombia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Afghanistan.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was it like for you, Clay, to go from, two very, I'm assuming very different, but both very kinetic environments, the drug wars in South America, to all of a sudden these, the global wars on terror in the Middle East. What was like the differences for you doing that?
Well, for us, I guess uniform.
Okay.
When I was down south, I would say 60% of the time I was wearing a suit working out of an embassy. And then 40% of the time I'm, sneaking and peeking out wherever I need to be to locate these labs, to locate the networks, and I did the same thing in Afghanistan, but, everybody there could possibly be a threat.
Yeah.
Whereas down south, nobody's a threat. You're going after the threat.
Okay.
There's petty crime and stuff like that, but there's no,
right.
Imminent threat of danger, I would say. And then it was more, strategic. Whereas, the war, you're going out, you're doing missions, you're doing hits, raids, reconnaissance, and then down there, it's more methodical. You're building a case, and things like that. So I would say that's the difference.
Okay.
I wouldn't say the danger was any less at all.
Right. Right.
Because if somebody found out who I was and what I was doing, I was in big trouble.
Right.
Including the country I was working in. So yeah, you're at a heightened state of awareness no matter where you're at.
Yeah.
Because of what we're doing. So.
Clay, would you talk to us about October of 2003?
Yeah, so I was in Iraq. I'd just been moved up to Fallujah maybe a month before that. I was south of Baghdad, and then we got moved up to Fallujah when it started getting hot up there. And so we were going in and around Fallujah, and I was providing overwatch for a meeting between my unit's leadership and a local sheikh who we were trying to get, kind of under our influence so that he could kind of stop some of the attacks and hit at least his area. And we heard enemy chatter that they were going to come attack us. And by the time I had an interpreter in Iraq, I don't speak Arabic. By the time he was telling me what he thought was going to happen and what they were saying, they were there. Several vehicles pulled up. These guys jumped out and it was a raid. They just attacked immediately. it's pretty heavy fighting. And then at one point, I heard a snap, like a really loud snap. And there was a lot of gunshots, RPGs,
Right.
grenades.
Right.
This was different. So I knew something was wrong, and I jumped up and went to grab my weapon, and I couldn't. My right arm didn't work. And turned to the soldier I was with and said, "Hey, are you okay?" And he looked like he saw a ghost. And he's like, "Man, you're bleeding bad." And so I looked over, and I had arterial blood spurting out of my shoulder and stuff. And I was like, "Oh, man." Go downstairs, link up with my lieutenant, and, I'm by this time in shock and everything. And he picks me up and carries me across the field and gets me to an ambulance, Humvee field ambulance. And, it gets me to the hospital. We arrive at the hospital. I literally jumped out of the back of the ambulance on my own 2 feet. And, the medics and the doctor, they knew I was coming in, and they ran over. And I just remember the doctor looking at me, and she's like, "We got you." And I died right on the ground. I collapsed. And apparently they carried me in, stabilized, what they could, and brought me back. It took about 8.5 minutes. And
holy cow. Wow, wow. 8.5 minutes.
Yeah. And my wife at the time was back home in North Carolina and was over 8 months pregnant.
Oof.
So that, created a situation where they needed to induce. And it was rough on both of them. They were both in ICU after the birth, and I was in the hospital in Iraq. And he was almost 6 months old by the time I got home.
Wow.
So, he at the time in the war, 2003, you healed up over there.
Yeah.
If you weren't dead or amputee or something like that. I mean, I had a bullet that went through my collarbone, my AC joint, and then stopped right up here. Came in. I was in prone.
Okay.
Came in this way. Came down. So basically, I had a broken collarbone and some tissue damage. And 3.5, 4 weeks later, I was back out.
You were back out doing missions.
Yeah.
Clay, what was that like for you going back out into combat after, having been shot, after having died, being medically expired for 8+ minutes? What was that like for you?
I didn't care anymore. To be honest, I was, I guess I just turned everything off. And, it's not like I didn't want to go home.
Right.
My wife had just had our first child.
Yeah.
So, I changed. It changed me profoundly. And, I just concentrated on that and concentrated on getting home. And, and then I get home and I figure out I guess I'm addicted to war, so I can't wait to get back, So, it's kind of a rare experience that you have when you have something like that, And
for sure, absolutely.
It just made me mad. I wanted more war. I wanted to kill more people.
Yeah.
So,
Clay, where would your career take you when you returned home in 2004?
So I got back, and I was kind of sick of being in the conventional military. I was in the 82nd Airborne, and I was sick of that.
Yeah.
And so I put in paperwork to get assigned to 7th Special Forces Group, which is also on Fort Bragg, so I didn't have to move. And I speak Spanish and French, so it kind of fit in with Latin American, Caribbean. And I got there in 2004 and started training up, doing a lot of schools, trade craft, driving, weapons, a lot of stuff. And 2005, I started deploying. Beginning of 2005, I started deploying to Colombia for a hostage rescue mission that was ongoing. So.
Would you talk to us a little bit about Operation Willing Spirit, Clay, and that Colombia hostage rescue mission?
Yeah, so there were 4 Americans and a Colombian flying a small airplane, mapping in southern Colombia, assisting their government mapping out, coca fields and things like that. they had engine problem go down, and the FARC, Colombia's insurgent group at the time,
Okay.
they were there. I mean, immediately they were on the ground. The pilot, one of the pilots had a broken leg, and so they executed him on the spot.
Oh.
And took the 3 Americans, and they also executed the Colombian. And then they took the other 3 Americans, and they held them captive for over 5 years, almost 6 years.
Holy cow. Wow.
So, we were down there trying to find them. And, they were in a small prison camp in the middle of the jungle, and nobody knew. There'd be proof of life every once in a while, but other than that, nothing. Nothing. And it was hard. It was hard. We did a lot to try and find them. And there was a lot of us looking. So, I'd go down there and I'd get pushed out these small Colombian Army outposts or a small town, and we'd live out of a safe house and do our job, just trying to find those guys, or find the bad guys knew where they were, it was probably for me. It was probably the most personally important mission, because that could have been me. I would do my job from aircraft. I would take my equipment, throw it on an airplane or a helicopter or a boat in the Amazon on a river, and I would go out. So it could have been me. These other contractors working for the State Department. I was down there doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And so getting them back was, I would say, even more pressing than finding bad guys in Iraq, Afghanistan, or anywhere else. So, yeah, it was a personal mission for me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. That's absolutely incredible. And we're all 3 recovered alive and able to return home to the U.S.
Yeah, it was a pretty complex mission how they were brought back, and we kind of built it and had it ready in case we could locate them.
Okay.
And then,
I'm doing something. I'm really sorry. Have you seen the keys? No.
Sorry. It was good when they came. I was not in Colombia when they were recovered. I was back in the States. It was, I think 2008 when they were brought back, and I was getting ready to go back to Afghanistan. And people from my unit were involved with the recovery, and it was personally satisfying. Just to know they were okay.
That's incredible. Wow. Clay, would you talk to us about July of 2007?
Yeah, so we were up in northern Afghanistan, up in Nuristan, and we were looking for a high-value target in the area, and so we were flying back and forth in a river valley, trying to locate him, and we were listening to the enemy saying, "Hey, should we shoot them down?" And the leader on that was saying no, because we had 2 attack helicopters, 2 Apaches with us. We decided to make a final push back up because I was getting close, but the Apaches couldn't visibly see him. They hide behind a rock, a tree, anything. And we had no enemy chatter at that point. They didn't say anything. And then all of a sudden, the helicopter got hit by a shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile, and in the rear tail section. And it pitched the helicopter forward. I'm in the back looking through the front of the helicopter, and I can see the river below us because we're vertical, nose down. And pilot gets it straightened out. We're taking large caliber and aircraft gunfire, a double barrel and aircraft gun, and some small arms. You could see them firing. So we're shooting back at them as we're flying, and we're in a mountainous river valley, so they're not below us. They are straight out the door. They're straight out. I'm shooting straight out the door, and And then I remember one point, well, I see a smoke trail moving off the mountain forward, and I think, oh yeah, they just fired a, errant RPG. Well, then it took a hard left and came straight at my face. And I remember seeing it turn and thinking, here it comes.
Yeah.
And I knew what it was at that point. I knew it wasn't an RPG. And because they don't do that. And so I just leaned back, and it came through the open door. I mean, right in front of me. I could feel, the heat and the exhaust and stuff from it. And it came up, punched a hole through the ceiling of the helicopter, and took off, disabled the left engine, and took off a large chunk of one of the rotor blades, which destabilized us in the air. And we went down.
Oh my gosh.
There was 9 of us on board. We all survived miraculously. And, there was a lot of enemy in the area. It was in kind of the Kamdesh River Valley, Lunde Sindh River Valley, northern Afghanistan. So a lot of fighting up there, just north of Asadabad and Array. I mean, there's like 4 medals of honor from that area. The lone survivor was just south of there.
Right.
The Battle of Kamdesh in 2008 was there, where we got shot down. So it was heavy enemy activity up there, and still is to this day.
Clay, how did this experience and the injuries you sustained that day in northeastern Afghanistan affect you going forward?
I was hurt much more severely than I knew. And kind of in my world, if you're not down for the count, you're still in the fight.
Right.
And I knew I had a concussion. I knew my back hurt. I knew my back hurt in a few places. I knew my hands were numb.
Right.
But we had another big mission the next week, a very big mission. If I was part of that, the war would have been over for us. So, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so we go back up into Tora Bora, climb a mountain, weeks after. And, I kind of toughed it out. Our medics hit me with, Toradol and Demerol, and I'm popping Percocets and, just so I can keep walking. And so I came home in September, and I would say by the 1st of October, the brain injury really started setting in. Yeah. And I went from being an operator, an intelligence guy, to not remembering, to put on both socks. Yeah. Or I'd go get a glass out of the cupboard because I was thirsty, and I'd turn, to get something, water or whatever, and I'd see something, and I would pick that, the other thing that needed to go, some piece of trash or something on the floor. And then I would leave, go back into the living room, and I'd be like, God dang it, I forgot to get my drink. But that was everything I did. Yeah. And, my wife at the time was, really concerned. So I went in and got checked out. And, I knew already, I'd already been, the medics and stuff. So in the crash, I fractured both elbows, ruptured my right kidney, broke my T6 vertebrae, had a brain injury, had some bullet shrapnel in my shin from our own ammunition on the helicopter cooking out. So I get home, I go get checked out, and they're like, oh, yeah, you have a brain injury. So I got enrolled in the Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center, which is on Fort Bragg, because that's where all the paratroopers are, and we bang our head all the time. Yeah. So, I spent the next probably 9 months enrolled there, doing vestibular therapy and cognitive therapy, occupational speech.
Right.
Trying to dial in meds.
Yeah.
And they initiated a medical board for retirement, and I fought it, and I basically convinced everybody that I was fine. Yeah. And I deployed again in July of 2008. Wow. And I was in Afghanistan, Western Afghanistan, and I just couldn't do it. Mentally, I couldn't keep up. Yep. I was forgetting things, just headaches. I would blank out, which now I know were seizures, because I have seizure disorder now because of it. because of the brain injury. And I didn't know, I caused these, small seizures. And then, they progressed over the years to tonic-clonic. So I have full-blown, what used to be called grand mal seizures.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say, I went into my leadership and said, hey, I can't do this anymore. And they were like, cool, they sent me home. And I went back to the med board process. And, I did that, and they had to, get me medically stabilized, and that took another 2 years. And so I retired in 2010.
Okay.
So after 3 months of brain injury treatment and physical and all that therapies, and a 2-month deployment in there because I just didn't want to give it up.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I'd been shot down, blown up, suicide bomber in Ramadi. I mean, all kinds of stuff, countless IEDs, I was gone 300 days a year.
Yeah.
And so I lived in the Middle East or in Latin America.
Right.
I'd come home, see my kids, for a week, and then go somewhere else for 5, 6, 7, 8 months. I guess I lost my sense of purpose when I retired. And not that your job should define who you are, but it's that purpose you get from, what you do. And if you have a job that you love or you get satisfaction, I mean, that's where you spend the majority of your day.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not the most important thing in my life, but it's what I did the most.
Yeah.
And, I'm actually in San Antonio right now, helping a friend who's another disabled vet finish a deck so that we can go to Colorado Springs on Wednesday for our other friend. He's retiring as a sergeant major in 10th Special Forces. So, and we all met in training, AIT. And
that's awesome.
We've been together, 24 years now. It's like the three of us. So.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So Clay, after your career in the Army, you would spend some time in the CIA. Would you talk on that just a little bit with us?
Yeah, so I worked for a company that provided training and assistance to people that were going to do kind of my technical intelligence kind of job. And, I taught them how to use equipment, taught them how to employ it, and taught them, did a lot with, training exercises and stuff like that. And then I did support some missions in Africa myself, in Nigeria and Somalia. So I did get to do a couple things there, but my main job was to, train people to do what I did. And so.
Clay, would you touch on for us kind of what the differences are between someone that does your job in the military as opposed to a government agency like the CIA?
Well, so my job, when you're in the military, falls under the purview of the National Security Agency. We're the technical intelligence people, communications, code breaking, that kind of stuff. And so, most of the people actually are in the military that do my job. And there's very small subsets of civilians. The U.S. Marshals have people that track down fugitives with that type of equipment and skill set. The FBI as well. So I would say the main difference is probably the legalities that cover what we do. We have restrictions that they may not in how they do things. And that's probably the main difference is, again, we're going after military type targets and they're doing more of that strategic intelligence, building, information and stuff. And now, our job has expanded into the whole cyber realm, and we were that was just kind of starting when I got out. We were handling a lot of that, the wireless portion.
Right.
And then now there's cyber command and all that stuff that covers all that. So I think now my MOS is back to just doing voice and wireless communication type stuff.
Okay. So Clay, as you transitioned out of, the U.S. Army, out of the CIA, out of that type of work, and you worked to regain your footing as a civilian, what would end up aiding your recovery during that time the most?
So I I stopped working completely after they caught Bin Laden. You know, they basically called us and said, "Hey, we don't need you guys anymore." I was like, "Cool." So I didn't know what I was going to do, and so we moved back home to Iowa, bought my ex-wife's grandma's house, and yeah, I really didn't have anything going on. There's not a lot of active duty combat vets. There's not a lot of combat vets from our era where I'm at. You know, I'm in town with 25,000 people, and there just aren't any.
Yep.
So I was really isolated. Didn't have a job. I didn't want to do anything that was around here. I didn't want to work at, you know, a corporation. You know, I have a master's in leadership and another one in international relations in Latin America. So we have a multinational company in my hometown that I could have just walked into and been, you know, an executive. And I don't want to do that. So I, you know, retirement and all my benefits and stuff, I just really didn't have to work. So I concentrated on my kids. You know, I have 3 kids, and I was a stay-at-home dad. I took care of them. My wife worked.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, I still lack that greater purpose.
Yeah.
You know, I have my kids and my family and things, but I lack that, you know, that greater purpose. And it was tough. It was tough for a long time. And I had a good friend that I met through the Wounded Warrior Project, another alumni from there, Jason Halverson, and he was a grant awardee from Catch Lift. I believe it was bicycle stuff for him. And you know, I was kind of in a bad place. I was getting divorced. I had moved out of my house, and he said, "Hey, you got to contact this lady, Lynn Coughlin." And I was like, "Okay." So he gave me her number, and I called her, and I was talking to her, and she's like, "Well, what do you think?" Because my shoulder's shot.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things I thought I couldn't do.
Right. Yep.
And we'll get to that. So I was like, you know, I paddled canoes and stuff growing up, and you know, I like that. You get a lot of exercise from it. You know, if you're not just floating down a river enjoying the day, if you're actually paddling, it's a good workout. So yeah, Catch Lift Fun granted me a kayak and a roof rack and a life vest and a paddle, and I hit the water, and it really changed how I saw living back in Iowa.
That's terrific. Talk to us a little bit more about that, Clay. How did that kayak help you to rehabilitate?
Well, so I've always been into photography. You know, guys used to make fun of me in the Army because I have tons of pictures of them that they don't have, you know, and places like, man, you have so many pictures. And so, you know, I was kayaking, I was going out and just being in nature and just enjoying that and getting a good workout and stuff. And I just started bringing my camera with me and started taking pictures. And, you know, when you're out in places like that, you see things you wouldn't at just a park or somewhere. And really enjoyed it. I wanted to do more of that. So I knew I had my GI Bill and VOC rehab, VA vocational rehab available to me. So I went in and said, "Hey, I want to do photography." And they're like, "Well, we don't normally do that. We'll give you an aptitude test." Well, I answered the aptitude test so that they would give me photography.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You know, you want to work outside or inside? Outside. You want to be creative or whatever, creative, just.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So they sent me to school. I already had 2 master's degrees. They sent me to community college for photography. You know, it was pretty cool, and outfitted me with professional gear and this laptop and everything. So yeah, you know, where I'm at, you know, the commercial farming over the last 60, 70 years has really destroyed the state, just destroyed it. In fact, Des Moines, Iowa, our biggest city, you can't drink the water there right now. They're trying to find out where to get water because of all the damn pesticides and fertilizer in the water.
Right.
So, and, you know, hog confinement. You know, the byproducts from hog confinement are just destroying our ecosystem here. You can't have 5,000 pigs in one building.
Yeah.
And expect it not to cause problems.
Right.
Ecologically. And so I love being outdoors. I lived in North Carolina forever, so I had the mountains, the ocean, and everything in between. And I come back to Iowa, and it's cornfields.
Yeah.
and you have to drive a while to find a county nature preserve that's maybe 5 acres. So I really started getting involved with conservation around here. Used my photography and stuff, and then the kayak. I would go out and I would get to places people weren't.
Yeah.
And I'm able to get photos and things like that. Bobcats. People don't even know we have bobcats, and I'm taking pictures of them. They're like, "Where'd you get that?" I'm like, "Right on the river, like 2 miles." And they're like, "What?" So I've been, in 2018, I was kayaking on a river and got out to take a break and was standing right under a bald eagle nest.
Oh my gosh.
And when I was a kid growing up, we didn't have them here because of pesticides.
Yep.
It killed them off. And so I moved back home, and, here they are. So I found the nest, and there were 2 fledglings in there, 2 baby eagles. And I've been kind of documenting them for the last 3 years. And,
oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I get a lot of really good photos. And I do migratory birds and wildflowers. So that's kind of I found my niche, I think.
Yeah.
I still get to go out, be in nature, and kind of, get that thrill of searching for something.
Right.
While I'm out there, instead of just walking and looking to see what's there, I'm actually actively looking for something. And, yeah.
So I know, like, for you, Clay, like you told us at the beginning, the outdoors, they've always been a part of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't want to be inside. We know that about you now. In my own personal life, I find so much healing and energy out of being outdoors, doing various things. What do you think it is about the outdoors, kind of for veterans specifically after war, that can be so healing?
Well, I think a few things. There's tons of psychological studies, behind the effects of nature on your well-being and your health. Vitamin D alone, go out and get some sun, But I think for us, I would say it's the lack of stimulation. Yeah. You can just go be. And I think a lot of us miss that, oddly, from deployment. Because you only had one thing to concentrate on, and don't die.
Yeah.
You come back to home and you have 1,000 things to worry about. And I tell guys all the time, just get outside.
Yeah.
Just go outside, get out away from wherever. And, I've had a lot of guys be like, man, thanks for telling me that. And they go on hikes now, or whatever, or camping. But I think it is. I think it's the lack of stimulation from the outside world. You get to be mindful of where you're at, what you're doing, and you immerse yourself in that. And, the world fades away when you do that.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
And, a lot of us have seen some really bad things. And you go out and you see a butterfly and it's like, wow, the world's not bad.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely always encourage people to get outside whenever they can. It's absolutely terrific. And there's something for everybody to do outside too. It's not like you're boxed into just one thing. So, Clay, talk to us about COVID a little bit and the changes you made kind of with your physical fitness and how you approached your workouts once COVID came, and kind of where you're at now with them.
Well, I'd been dead, so I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
When COVID hit, I necessary precautions, did all that, but I did not stay in my house.
Yeah.
I went to Lake Tahoe and went fishing. I went to the Boundary Waters in Minnesota and paddled with my brother 5 different lakes. You paddle a lake, you pick up your stuff, and portage it to the next lake, and on your back, canoe and all. And we spent 5 days up there, just the 2 of us on an island.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Very cool.
Spent a lot of time outside with my kids fishing and things like that because nobody else was out there.
Yeah.
We went to Lake Tahoe, there's nobody there, and we didn't go to vacay, we went to go fishing. And, my son had COVID, tested positive for almost 5 months. And so that, we were kind of locked in, quarantined, and just trying to live like that. And, I saw so many people almost stop living which I had done for nearly a decade, depression and physical issues and things like that. And then when I saw everybody else in the world doing that, I was like, "No, you can't do this anymore."
Yeah.
So I got up and I started doing things. It's weird. I had this almost epiphany. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I want to be around. And so I kind of looked at myself,
right.
And I was like, "Man, you gotta take care of yourself." So I started, eating better and doing more than just kayaking, a few times a week to get loose and feel better.
Yep.
I really got earnest about it. I developed drop foot by July. My right foot just stopped working, and went to the few different specialists, a lot of tests, and they were basically like, "There's nothing we can do," and they sent me to a prosthetic place, and they issued me a custom-made carbon fiber, ankle brace to hold my foot locked, and said, "Hey, this is what you got for the rest of your life." I'm like, "Nah, not me." I'd fought back from some pretty serious stuff.
Yeah.
So I said, "Hey, can I do physical therapy?" And they said, "Yeah." So I started doing physical therapy twice a week, and immediately following, I do athletic training with a guy for an hour, and I feel so much better, just in life.
Yeah.
Physically, pain is less. I feel better because I can do more than I could when I thought I couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And I cured my foot.
That's so awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, I just found out a couple weeks ago. I'm getting ready to have neck surgery, I guess. So, it's setback after setback.
Yeah.
You just keep going. And I gave up for a long time, and I don't think I'll ever do that again. I look back at the years I spent on my couch or in my recliner, and I don't even like that person. So.
Yeah. So, Clay, I have one last question I want to ask you today.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to you today, sitting here all these years later, to say I'm a Catch a Lift Fund veteran athlete?
I'm really proud that I can be associated with some of the people like yourself and some of the other people you see that are thriving in CrossFit or weightlifting or just living a better life and having that purpose again. That purpose. And I think that purpose of self-improvement is probably the most important purpose you can have. And I reached out to Catch a Lift at a time I really just was trying to survive. And now re-engaging with Jimmy Blockett, doing the band program, which I've been doing resistance band training and physical therapy because I don't have a collarbone. And so, free weights are just not going to work for me. And it's just really cool to me that there's this whole, I don't know if it's a movement, but definitely a large group of people who don't want to just survive. They want to thrive. And I think that is that military mindset that I was used to. In the units I served in. It was people that weren't just punching the time card. They were trying to be the best person in the unit every day. We were all competing with each other to be the best. And, I see that with Catch a Lift Fun. And it's not competitive, and everybody's there to support each other and stuff. It's really cool to me,
It is. It absolutely is. And we are so very blessed to have you a part of the Catch a Lift family, Clay.
Thanks.
Clay, first of all, thank you so very much for your service to our great nation and everything you've done to keep our country safe and free. We thank you so very much. And thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story and your light with all of us. Absolutely tremendous. Absolutely tremendous.
Yeah.
That's it for this week's episode of the Coach's Corner. We will return next Wednesday at 1 Eastern Time with another episode. Thank you again, Clay, for sharing your story and light with us all. Thank you to ClearBridge and ID Technologies for all your support of all things Catch a Lift, and especially the Coach's Corner podcast. Thank you to Lynn Coughlin, Henry Pomper, and Kaylee Nasiri for all of the work you do week in and week out to put this podcast out. And thank you to the entire Cal team. Until next week, keep it real and stay Cal strong.